Hi YouTube, it's been a while. It's me, Barber's King, here with a review of Black Myth Wukong. Now, Black Myth Wukong's been hyped for a long time, ever since the original trailers showed off the gameplay and people kind of lost their minds over it. And now that I've beaten the game, done most of the content within, I can give you a pretty clear picture of what I think about the game. At its core, Wukong is a Souls-like with a unique blend of ideas from other games in the genre, namely Elden Ring, God of War 2018 and Ragnarok, and Nioh. While I appreciate that the devs seem to try to cherry pick some of the better aspects of those games and try to use some of their systems, the result to me is a bit jumbled and not as satisfying as it should have been. I wouldn't say that Wukong's combat system necessarily bad, rather that I felt like it needed something overall. Now, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, and Nioh games give the player a seemingly bottomless amount of weapons, spells, and abilities to experiment with. God of War 2018 and Ragnarok also give the player a diverse moveset with the spear, the axe, and the Blades of Chaos, as well as armor sets and spells for the player to use. Even games like Stellar Blade and the classic God of War games also give the player a number of different combos they can perform to try to experiment and optimize with. Now, Wukong certainly has a number of abilities for the player to experiment with. You can freeze time, you can create clones of yourself, you can transform into a different form with a Spartan Rage-esque burst, you can transform yourself into stone to parry attacks, you can dash and become momentarily invincible. I think where the gameplay falls a little flat to me is that no matter what I tried to experiment with, the different moves, the different armor sets, it always felt like mashing the same attack with an occasional dodge here and there seemed like the optimal way to do damage and get through the fights. The disappointing thing here is that Wukong has a projectile blocking button and a jump button, which really don't seem all that well implemented in the actual combat. I sort of wish that those were more of a mainstay and were required in almost every boss fight where you had to parry projectiles or maybe jump over a sweep. It might have made the combat a bit more Sekiro-esque, which I think would have made the combat a little bit better in my opinion against the vast majority of the bosses. To Wukong's credit, there are a number of truly extraordinary bosses in the game. One thing I've noticed over playing a number of Souls-like is that some of the bosses in those games come across either cheap or shoddy imitations of some of FromSoft's work. While undoubtedly there is some From Software inspiration kind of endemic inside of Wukong, I feel there are a number of truly unique and really spectacular bosses that made Wukong a pretty memorable experience. At times, Black Myth Wukong feels like a straight-up boss rush as you kind of ping-pong from one boss to the next, but the sheer variety and diversity of the boss is one of the core pillar strengths of Wukong. It's something that kind of holds the entire game together, is how good the bosses are. While the bosses may be one of the game's strengths, the level design is not. The levels in Wukong are rather awkwardly constructed, full of awkward invisible walls and some frustrating limitations. There also isn't much to do in any given level aside from running from checkpoint to checkpoint and killing the bosses, with only a couple exceptions across the entire game. Players may also be frustrated by the lack of any kind of map in the game. The lack of a map is a bit baffling, especially when the areas start to get like really tremendous in size. Now, exploring without a map makes it pretty easy to also miss some important upgrade locations. I myself missed the hub world and blacksmith all because I had missed a single boss fight that was on a beach somewhere. So I just completely missed out on this entire other aspect of the game until towards the end. It gets even worse than that because there are a number of items in the game that make some boss fights go from insanely difficult to much more manageable if you just miss like a side boss and a side area and a side quest, and the game like really doesn't do a good job of telling you that those things are. I'm thinking specifically of the 100-Eyed Taoist Master. I think he's the boss in the 3rd chapter. And if you do not have the needle when you fight that boss, it is way harder when he gets to around like a half health or a third health or so. Now, I beat him without the needle and then later went back to go find the needle. But yeah, there's really no system in the game that even tells you like, hey, you should probably go get that needle. It's going to help you a lot. So like, yeah, it's kind of easy to just walk past some other things. I think there's a number of times where that happens in the game where there's like something in the world can help you mitigate the challenge of a boss. So if you're really struggling with one of those things, there's a good chance that you might have missed some kind of big power-up. If you plan to play Wukong, I'd recommend using a map to help keep track of your progress. There's even a number of maps have already cropped up online, stuff that can already help your gameplay. And I really feel like this should have been baked into the game's menus on its own. While the areas may be frustrating to navigate and a bit dull in terms of design, I have to say that the areas of Black Myth Wukong are visually incredibly impressive. In fact, Wukong's art and visuals in general are truly remarkable and rival some of the best available currently in the genre. If nothing else, I almost felt compelled to keep playing just to see, like, what was the next boss going to look like? What was the next area going to look like? What's the next world going to be like? So I had to say this is the case where the visuals were a huge positive for the game. It was definitely like a visual treat to play through Black Myth Wukong. Now, keep in mind, though, I was playing on a PC with a 4090, and I have heard that there are performance issues on some weaker cards and on the PS5. I don't know if they've patched it since release, so your experience may vary in terms of just the way the game looks. Story-wise, I feel like Wukong was a game that required some reading or some forward knowledge to really understand what was even happening at all. While I understand some different audiences may already be familiar with the stories and they're familiar with Journey to the West, for someone like myself who's completely unfamiliar with the source material, I was more than a bit lost going through Black Myth Wukong trying to keep up with the story. It would have been nice to have been enfranchised in Wukong's story and given more of a chance to keep up with stuff. Now, I got the broad strokes, like there was this monkey king named Wukong and he challenged the deities of heaven and he got sealed away. And now we seem to be gathering his pieces. Like, I get all of that, but there are so many times where I was just completely lost as to what was actually going on, who the various characters were, who the references were, and yeah, really not much there to say. I can't recommend Black Myth Wukong if you were looking for a story-driven game. I did, however, greatly enjoy the end of chapter cutscenes. Now, the end of chapter cutscenes are almost like miniature short, like Pixar-esque films. And I gotta say, like, each one of those was so fun to watch, and so they might be some of my favorite cutscenes I've seen in a video game lately. They were short, very interesting. They had their own little self-contained little miniature stories that were all really interesting. And I gotta say, I love the end of chapter cutscenes. So there was that. I just kind of wish that the larger story hit nearly half as well as the end of chapter cutscenes did. Despite having a number of issues with Wukong's combat, level design, storytelling, I really can't help but feel that there was some real enthusiasm poured into this project by the devs. Now, during some of the secret encounters, like really late in the game where there's like a secret ending, you have to do a bunch of extra steps to get there, I found myself like really honestly swept away by the epic scale and like the crazy action set pieces. And that honestly doesn't happen to me too often. It's pretty rare that a game can get me feeling like, whoa, holy crap. Those moments are pretty rare for me. I'm also all in favor of more Chinese and South Korean devs, and really devs from anywhere, honestly, kind of clearing their throats and experimenting with new games like Lies of P, which was another fucking fantastic game. I love Lies of P. Or Black Myth Wukong, which was also really good. Taking the existing formulas and adding their own unique spin on it. I also believe that way too many people believe creativity is like an island, where like a game's concept, like if a new game comes out, a game has to be like this singular, unique thing that has never existed before and must be like completely standalone and have nothing else even close to it. See, to me, my view is that creativity is more of like a conversation where you have an existing conversation, and then when somebody new comes in, maybe they add something new to that conversation. Now, the conversation, we're all familiar with it, but now there's like a new idea or a new perspective. And then somebody else comes in and they add their own spin on it. So in the end, it ends up you end up getting a new takes on an already existing formula, and you get new perspectives, new ideas adding onto that chorus of new things. So I don't have any problem with more Souls-likes and more games like that, and I'm all for devs like the devs behind Wukong, devs behind Lies of P, trying these different ideas and coming up with unique spins. If anything else, it keeps FromSoft trying to come up with new stuff and keep upping their game as well. So you're all waiting for the score. I would give Black Myth Wukong a 7.5 out of 10. I feel like the level design and some of the combat decisions kind of hold it back from what it could have been. I feel like there was the real kind of kernel of a really incredible game somewhere in Black Myth Wukong that, maybe, if it's their first effort on this sort of game, really hats off to them for an incredible job on their first effort for this kind of game, because they really did an amazing job. But I do feel like the game kind of pales in comparison maybe to some other 3D action RPGs that we've gotten. I would compare this, I would probably say I like Black Myth Wukong more than Stellar Blade. I feel like the style of Black Myth Wukong and the boss design was a lot like, it was a more unique feeling game over Stellar Blade, although Stellar Blade wasn't really terrible on its own either. But I would say that I do not like Black Myth Wukong nearly as much as I liked Lies of P. I really loved Lies of P. I felt like Lies of P really was able to add something truly unique to the conversation, and had some really incredible bosses, some cool weapon designs, and had a lot more variety in terms of gameplay than Black Myth Wukong overall. Now, does that mean I think Black Myth Wukong is a bad game? No. So for me, you have to understand a 7.5 out of 10 is well above average, and I very rarely give games a 9 or 10 out of 10. So I'm pretty harsh in my critiques. Now, is this a must play for you? I think that that's up to you. I think that if you're into this sort of game, if you like Dark Souls, if you like all these games, you want to see something unique, you've seen some of the gameplay, go for it. I think that if you're a little bit on the fence, you maybe wait for a sale. I kind of imagine this game would not be a full price for too long, and see how things develop, especially if you're maybe limited to PS5 right now. If you don't want to deal with the performance issues or something, maybe wait until you can get a better capture card or something like that. So I don't really feel like there's a rush, especially considering like it's a single player game. So what exactly is the rush? You may as well wait for a sale, and the game's not going anywhere, right? So you can always bide your time and wait for an opportunity. Now, I did enjoy this game overall. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Thank you for watching. I like to do some more reviews here in the future. I am thinking about reviewing Astro Bot, which I am close to finishing. I'm loving Astro Bot currently. I'm also debating reviewing Space Marine 2 and possibly some other games, so stick around. If you please like, comment, and subscribe, I would really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.